Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by our friends over at Wendy's. Frozen pucks are awesome when they're in the back of the other guy's net, but that doesn't mean that you'd want to eat one. And that's why Wendy's only ever uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer in all of their burgers. Whether you order a Baconator, Dave Single, or even a JBC, you'll only ever find real fresh beef that's juicy and loaded with fresh toppings. So download the Wendy's app, check out the latest deals, and order a burger that's only job is being delicious. My name is Dave Woodrelli. That is Harmon Dial, our technical producer. The man at the controls is Grady Sass. Folks, it was supposed to be an episode all about the Florida Panthers. We're going to talk about their roster construction, all that fun stuff. And we're not going to do any of that today. We're pushing that to Friday for our Cup Final preview episode. We'll be back at the Wall Center on Friday for that episode. But coming at you with a remote episode today, we've got some news. We've got some news in Canuckland, Harmon.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love when there's last minute some Canucks news because I'm sure people would much rather have us dissect, Canucks conversation, actually talk about Vancouver rather than the Panthers. So I'm jacked up for it.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of Canucks stuff to get to. Jeff Paterson of Rinkwide Vancouver and Canucks Army and Scaris and Price and all of us over here at Canucks Army. He's our reporter, and he's going to join us later. Rick Tockett's going to speak later today. We won't be able to react to that because it's happening at 3:30, and obviously we're going live at 2 o'clock here. But I'm curious what Tockett's going to say, what kind of questions he's going to get, because the changes, Harm, and the Canucks news are all about the coaching staff. Let's get into it. Our opening segment today is brought to you by our friends over at Four Winds Brewing, more specifically the Huff Gold IPA. If you like the Four Winds Light but are looking for something with a bit more weight behind it, you should check out the Four Winds Huff Gold Pilsner. Excuse me, I called it an IPA. It's a Pilsner, my mistake. Brewed as an homage to great German pils that came before it, Huff Gold is crisp and clean with a nice little European hop zip to round it all out. You can ask for Huff Gold anywhere you find Four Winds products, and it's also available online at fourwindsbrewing.ca for delivery anywhere in BC. Four Winds Brewing, located and owned in Delta, British Columbia. Okay, people are still calling out my wall. My wall looks great. I'm so happy with my wall. I've got a Stanchies reader thing up there. I like my wall. I've got the Canucks Army playoff shirt behind. I like my wall.
Not as beautifully decorated as mine, though.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You've got like a window there. There's that. I don't have a window. I wish I had a window. But anyways, yeah, you've got it. You've got a nice little background yourself there. Anyways,
it's beautiful. Only people with great taste in art can see all the designs.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Adam, yeah, this is someone in the chat responded to that comment about my wall and said, look at Harmon's wall then. If my wall upsets you so much, go look at Harmon's. Whatever. Anyway, okay, let's get into the changes to the coaching staff which the Canucks announced earlier today, Harmon. The big one, obviously, is that Yogi Švejkovský, who has been a skills coach with them in the past, local guy, we've seen him around the rink a ton, always out there on the ice with the players at practice. He has been promoted to assistant coach, and the early reports and the early indications are that he is going to be running the power play. I find that interesting because obviously the big hole, at least when we look at it, was that Mike Yeo, who ran the penalty kill, was gone. He is now joining Travis Green in Ottawa with Nolan Baumgartner, but they don't have a penalty kill coach. So I was thinking when they announced the hiring of Yogi that he was going to be just penalty kill, but it sounds like he's actually going to be in charge of power play. Rick Tocchet appearing to kind of relinquish some of that responsibility. Obviously, Rick Tocchet was he was coaching the Canucks power play last year.
Yeah, I like this promotion for Yogi. I like it from the Canucks perspective. And just to provide a little bit of background, he was an assistant coach for 8 years for the Vancouver Giants in the mid-2000s before transitioning to the skills side, originally with the Giants, then sort of hopping around the lower mainland before starting in Abbotsford as a skills coach and then being a skills coach for the main team here in Vancouver. He's exceptionally regarded on the skills side. His understanding and knowledge of the technical side of the game is legitimately mind-blowing. Little but impactful details like body positioning, winning battles, wall work when there's a pinching defenseman, and how do you make the play to get the puck out, recovering pucks on the forecheck, net front, and of course, skills when a player actually has possession too. Again, his knowledge and expertise there is astounding. And I'll actually give you a practical example. So Carson Soucy, I remember watching a ton of his tape in Seattle. And when I wrote my deep dive article on Soucy after the Canucks signed him, my main takeaway was he's absolutely got the defensive IQ and in size to be a top 4 defender, but he needs to level up his puck skills by like 10 to 15% to be able to actually thrive in a top 4 role. Because when I watched him in Seattle, he would have difficulty on defensive zone retrievals, making plays when forecheckers are right on him. He would struggle in that capacity, even in the playoffs when he played some of his best hockey for the Kraken. This year, when Soucy was hurt, I had a chance to talk to him. He did a ton of work on breakouts, on making those little plays under pressure with Yogi. And throughout this entire season, we were gushing about how much better does Carson Soucy look moving the puck. And not that he's a dynamic stud all of a sudden, but he can hold his own in a top 4 role. A lot of that is because of Yogi. Soucy had a ton of high praise from there. Yogi commands a lot of respect and attention from players because of that knowledge. And that, I think, helps when you have a guy moving from skills to an assistant coach. He holds players' attention. The way that he explains things, his demeanor, his knowledge, his approach are all apparently off the charts. And he's a strong tactician offensively. It's not just the skill side. And so it makes sense to me that he's reportedly perhaps going to get the power play portfolio.
Now, this is the quote from GM Patrick Alvin when they announced it. He said, "After exploring all of our options, it became very clear that the best candidate was already in our organization. The ability to promote from within will help us in the transition, as Yogi has a great spelling mistake in the press release, but anyways, has a great understanding of our systems and the way that we want to play. Including the Sedins more in our day-to-day coaching duties will be hugely beneficial to our group, both on and off the ice. Both Daniel and Henrik bring a very unique perspective and competitive mindset to our staff." Mindset should also be one word for whoever's editing the Canucks press releases. Anyways, that's the other portion of this. Daniel and Henrik Sedin get their roles enhanced. That's where one thing that I'm really curious to hear speak about today is where, like, what's going to be different about what they did last year, because the Sedins were out basically every morning skate, every practice. Like, maybe are they going to go on the road now? Is that maybe what they mean by enhanced? I'm curious what that's actually going to mean, because they've been in charge of power play 2 last year. They were on the ice seemingly all the time in both Abbotsford and Vancouver. So I'm just curious what it's actually going to look like for them to have their roles enhanced.
Yeah, 100%. That's the part of the press release where I wasn't sure on, because I was thinking to myself, they already seem like they're working more than full-time hours between what they're doing in Vancouver and what they're doing in Abbotsford. So does that mean they're going to be a little bit less involved in Abby and focus more on the NHL side? Because again, as you alluded to, you see them on the rink all the time. It's not like the Sedins have been working in this sort of part-time role or part-time basis. That's a part that I'm curious to see what it'll actually look like. And that's why I'm still wondering if they're going to have to bring someone in externally, not necessarily as another assistant coach, but you walk through what the coaching staff looked like this past season, and we already know that nobody was really handling there wasn't a designated power play coach. It was sort of done by committee. So that alone, even if everybody was staying from the coaching staff last season, we would have been like, it'd be nice to add a power play coach maybe. But then on top of that, they parted ways with Yo, who was obviously running the penalty kill. Yogi was already with the Canucks on a full-time basis. So it's not like he's like a new hire, and the Sedins are already pretty heavily involved. So is there going to be do you need to, for example, even bring in somebody to pick up some of the skills work that Yogi would do, but now maybe he doesn't have time for it because he might be responsible for the power play and more involved with assistant responsibilities? That would be one thing that I'd be keeping an eye on, because they haven't. It feels like in terms of manpower and the resources that they haven't actually added anything yet compared to last season.
I'm really curious who's going to run the penalty kill. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if today Tocchet comes out and says, yeah, it's actually going to be Adam Foote, and maybe he'll have a hand in it as well. Like, Tocchet and Foote will look at it together. I'm curious. I'm curious what that's gonna bring. But we haven't even had a chance to talk about Luke Gazdic, so we'll talk about it in anyone else, because we've got too much Canucks news. Jeff Paterson's going to join us in a matter of moments. Grady, just let me know when he's ready, because I can't see. I don't know why I can't see anymore when Jeff's ready, but Whenever Jeff's ready, we'll bring him on. We're always happy to be chatting with our man, Jeff Paterson. Okay, Harm, anything else you wanted to say about the coaching specifically before we get to Jeff?
No, I think we covered it pretty well there. Again, he's extremely well regarded. I have a lot of confidence and faith that he's going to excel in this role. Could there be a bit of a learning curve in the sense of promoting from skill side to assistant? Maybe, but he's got such a strong knowledge and understanding of the game. And again, the big thing for me is with Rick Tocchet or Adam Foote, for example, they don't have to worry too much about, do my words carry weight, because their NHL resume speaks for itself. So the first thing you always ask when you have an assistant that maybe didn't have the most illustrious NHL track record as a player is, are they going to legitimately command respect from the players? Are they going to get buy-in, right? But this is where, again, Yogi, the experience that he already has working with these players, the relationship that he's built, how much he's helped these players improve on the skill side. Everybody knows how much of a genius he is on the technical side. He is going to already get that respect, get that buy-in, which I think is massive for that transition from skills to assistant.
Yeah, it absolutely matters. And hey, we haven't even talked about Ian Cole. There's so much going on. So we're going to get to Jeff, but before, I'll quickly preface it. Ian Cole is going to test free agency, that coming from Rick Dhaliwal. We'll talk about it more in anyone else. And it's kind of links into our poll question, which is all about penalty killing. But let's chat about everything with Jeff, because there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's chat with our man, Jeff Paterson, who's brought to you by our friends over at Greta, the home of our electric watch parties during the season and our off-season chill spot at this time of year. Make Greta your spot to eat, drink, and play this spring and summer. Greta Bar YVR. All right, let's bring him in. Jeff Paterson. It's been a while since we've talked to Jeff when there's a lot of Canucks topics to get to, but we've got one, Jeff. We've got some news. We've got some actual news to talk about. So first of all, your reaction to the coaching changes today.
Well, I echo a lot of the things that you guys just talked about with Yogi. I mean, highly respected within the walls of Rogers Arena. You don't fluke your way into an assistant coaching job in the National Hockey League. And this guy, it wasn't that long ago he was running a hockey academy out in Delta, and here he is now promoted to an assistant coach in the National Hockey League. So I'm happy for him. The work that he put in. Harm talked about when he's working with guys that are injured or out of the lineup, it's not just cracking the whip and bag skating. He's preparing them to re-enter the National Hockey League, to jump in and get back up to speed. And a lot of guys remarked about the work that he had done there that allowed them to get back in. And look at a guy like Dakota Joshua, who was out when Carson Soucy was out with that second injury. And I remember being down in Seattle and watching how hard those guys worked after a morning skate. Dakota Joshua jumped right back in the lineup and didn't miss a beat. The goal scoring was there. The hands were there. Some of that's good luck and good timing, but some of that is preparation as well. So delighted for Yogi to get this opportunity. I remember watching him score 58 goals in the Western Hockey League with the Tri-City Americans going way back. I didn't see all of them, but when I was in Kamloops, he was lighting up the Western Hockey League. 58 goals in 70 games, by the way. Interesting side note, he and Rick Tocchet both played for the Washington Capitals in 1996-97. I don't know if they were teammates because Yogi barely played, but Rick was added to that Capitals roster at some point in the trade. So they did overlap there, and now here they are working together again. So I want to be clear when I say I'm delighted for Yogi that he gets the opportunity, but in the same breath, I do wonder if it's a missed opportunity. I really felt there are so many quality head coaching candidates that are out of work. You saw Lane Lambert added to Craig Berube's staff in Toronto. This is a guy that was a head coach this past season with the Islanders, got fired. There are a bunch of those kinds of guys, and I do wonder if it was an opportunity to go outside the organization, bring in somebody with fresh views, with broad experience, all those types of things. So maybe Yogi turns out to be the right man for the job, but I am curious, and one of the things I want to ask Rick Tocchet is how wide a search did they conduct here? When you have an internal candidate, I'm always leery. Did you look outside your walls, or were you kind of zeroed in on this guy from the outset? And the other thing too, and this isn't necessarily on Yogi, but he was here. He was on the ice at practice almost every day. You talked about Daniel and Henrik. They were there. Like, these were voices that had a seat at the table, as Rick Tocchet says. How come none of them figured out the power play in the second half and down the stretch? Now you're going to turn to one or all of them and think that they're the answers for this power play that got so stagnant and ultimately hurt the Vancouver Canucks in the playoffs. So that's where I look at it. It's a great day for Yogi getting a promotion, but I do wonder if it was a missed opportunity to find a power play specialist, somebody that's worked and proven his results in the National Hockey League. But the Canucks have elected to go this way, and we'll see how it all works out.
Whether it's on the PK side or maybe even picking up on some of the skills responsibilities that Yogi maybe won't have as much time for, do you think, considering how much time Yogi and the Sedins were already investing on the ice, that the Canucks should perhaps look at adding another external voice, maybe not in an assistant capacity, but just bringing another body to the table to pick up on responsibilities?
Well, I'm curious, Harm, because they've always had a skills coach. And so I do wonder if that's a role that they have to fill, or if they're looking to fill. Again, another question I think that'll get put to Rick Tocchet here when he's made available later today, because you're right. Like, the work that Yogi did with these players, I don't think you can just discount that. I'm like you guys, like, I'm baffled about what this means for both Daniel and Henrik, because it felt to me like every time I was at practice, they were out there at Rogers Arena. In the playoffs, they were on the road. They go out to Abbotsford. Like, they're already invested in doing an awful lot and getting praise. And now with Manny Malhotra coming in, you'd think that they would want to be buffers and conduits between the big league team and Manny getting his feet wet as a head coach in the American Hockey League. So I am curious to see if Rick Tocchet will define the rules for all of these guys. And again, proof will be in the pudding here when the season starts. But Mike Yeo was a guy that had NHL head coaching experience ×2. He's gone. Now, I think we expect that the penalty kill is going to be turned over to Adam Foote, who did a nice job and obviously has a huge NHL playing resume. But this would be the first time that he is charged with running a penalty kill in the National Hockey League. And then the other end is the power play that let the Canucks down the stretch. And they're going to turn that over to, we think, a first-time assistant coach. So that's where I do think experience matters. And Foote's got a ton of it as a player, and Rick Tocchet obviously has a ton of it. The Sedins are Hall of Famers. Like, they've got people on the staff, but we saw what happened, particularly to the power play, and why this group couldn't get the players to adapt, why they couldn't make necessary changes and adjustments based on what they were seeing, particularly from the Oilers in the power in playoffs. And we know that the Oilers have done it not just to the Canucks, but to the Kings and the Dallas Stars as well. And we'll see if they can keep doing that on the penalty kill to the Florida Panthers. So, yeah, I think there's some questions around the staffing. And I think the other thing, too, is, was any of this cost related, right? Like, Mike Yeo was a pedigreed assistant coach. I'm guessing that he had a higher price point and ultimately walked away from the Vancouver Canucks. It may have been over money, may have been over term, but Jeremy Colleton is replaced by a first-time head coach in the American Hockey League as well. And so I wonder if this is any indication of any kind of cost cutting going on around Rogers Arena these days.
Speaking of the penalty kill, obviously we kind of touched on how we have some questions for Rick Tocchet about how it's going to be coached. The report coming out today from Dollywall that Ian Cole is going to be testing free agency. So no matter who's coaching the penalty kill, they'll likely have to do it without Ian Cole. Just your thoughts on that.
I'm not surprised that, like, at 35, going on 36, he'll be 36 next February, I think. He had a nice season. He played a role for the Vancouver Canucks. I still thought that maybe there was an opportunity to manage his workload a little bit more down the stretch. They did it a couple of times, and I thought it was a step in the right direction. But, he was really good in the Nashville series, and I don't want what happened to him in Edmonton to overshadow the Canucks penalty kill. I wrote a piece at Canucks Army. To me, it was the unsung hero of that opening round. I mean, Artur Silovs maybe was even more so, but the Canucks penalty kill gave up 2 goals against the Predators. Ian Cole logged 6 minutes more shorthanded than any other Vancouver Canucks in a 6-game series. Like, that's a significant amount of shorthanded ice time, and he was an absolute rock. And then, he gets hurt in game 2, is the report, against the Oilers, and his play dropped. There's no question. There were just poor decisions, unable to clear pucks on the penalty kill, bad bounces that went in off him. So from one series to the other, a noticeable difference. And I think the deeper they went in the playoffs, the tougher it was going to be for a player at that age. Like, it's a young man's league. It's getting faster by the day. And if they're serious about bringing Tyler Myers back, Myers is 34 going on 35. I think you have to be wary of having too many veterans in a league that's getting faster all the time as well. So Look, they can't bring them all back. We know that. And so I'm not necessarily surprised to hear that they're looking, as much as the report was they liked Ian Cole, but they wanted him at, a team-friendly price point. Cole still thinks he can play. He's not afraid to move. We've seen that 5 different teams in the last 5 years. Keep the suitcase packed, I guess, and don't sign a long-term lease wherever you're living. But he still thinks he can play, and so he can shop himself. That doesn't close the door. I suppose they could double back once free agency opens. But in my world, I'm anticipating that we've seen the last of Ian Cole as a member of the Vancouver Canucks, as straight up a guy as you can imagine. You were both in the locker room. You dealt with him. They don't come a whole lot better than Ian Cole. Veteran leadership, the championship pedigree, and all those types of things. But at some point, and in some places, the Canucks are going to have to make some decisions, and it sounds like this is one of them that they're going to try to move on from.
Are you nervous about the future of the penalty kill? I know we kind of asked you a little bit about that, I think maybe last week or earlier in the offseason, but sounds like Cole's going to test the market. Lindholm looks like he's probably more likely than not to price himself out. Dakota Joshua's a free agent. Even Myers, we don't know exactly what his future looks like. Are you nervous about the future of this penalty killer, or do you look at some of the players on the existing roster and, maybe even an Ilya Mikheyev, who used to play a big PK role in Toronto, but hasn't had the opportunity? Where do you stand on the PK? Do you think they have the internal options to step up? What's your vibe?
Well, it's funny, letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, and Quads would know more than I do, because I wrote the piece before we knew the Ian Cole story, but I wrote a piece this morning, and the headline was, are the Canucks going to have to focus on penalty killers in free agency for a second straight year? And this, again, was before the Cole news dropped, and I think the answer is yes, that sure, they've got some internal candidates, but I was a little surprised, and this was sort of the genesis of the piece, was if you look at the playoffs, 13 playoff games, the 6 most used penalty killers by the Vancouver Canucks are all on expiring contracts. And 7 of 8, because Filip Hronek, he'll be out of a contract here as well. The only guy is Carson Soucy. Of those top 8 minute-munching guys on the penalty kill in the playoffs, Soucy's the only one under contract. So that tells you that the existing guys, Nils Amon and Phil DiGiuseppe and, Patterson and JT Miller, like, can they do some penalty killing? Sure. But the guys that the coaches leaned on, I mean, just looking at the ice time, that's basically those are the players that the coaches trusted. Those are the ones they wanted to get out in those situations. The top 6 are all out of contract. Can they bring some of them back? Yeah, probably. But I do wonder if they are going to have to prioritize that and look at guys who bring that particular skill set to the mix. So I started to look around, and as part of the column, and I don't want to give it all away because I want people to read it, obviously, but I looked at the top 10 penalty killing teams from the regular season and who among them ate up big penalty killing minutes that are going to be unrestricted free agents. And to me, there are some really interesting names that I think can be had at, depth level prices. The Canucks showed last year that they were able to target that area and take a penalty kill that was dead last and move it to league average. League average leaves you with a ton of room for improvement still, but can they get back to league average if they lose a significant portion of the guys that, like Dakota Joshua, everybody talks about his size and the goal scoring. And I mean, he became one of the best penalty killing forwards that the Vancouver Canucks had. And you just look at any measurables and metrics, like his penalty killing stands up. So, that's another area that I think he can bring wherever he goes. If it's back here in Vancouver, great. But so don't discount the fact that if Joshua leaves in free agency, like that's a significant hole on a number of levels, but penalty kill is kind of sneaky. One of the things that he really had developed into. Part of my article too, Harm, is like Vasily Podkolzin's not going to be a big scorer in the National Hockey League. Like I think that much is evident now at 23, 5 years removed from his draft. But go back to that 2019 draft and all the previews. It was about his hockey IQ. It was about his motors always running. It's the, a guy that's going to be trusted late in games to protect leads. Like he played over 200 minutes this past year, not a single second on the penalty kill for the Vancouver Canucks. So is that an area? Can they develop that? Because if he's not going to be a scorer, and I'm not convinced that he is, if he's going to carve out a career in the National Hockey League, he's at a point now where he's got to find some specific roles for himself. And I wonder if penalty kill could be an area that he could adapt and take on and ultimately find a way to contribute to the Vancouver Canucks.
Been saying it forever. Put Vasily Podkolzin on the penalty kill. We've been saying it for a long time on this show. Anyways, sticking with the penalty kill, Jeff, we'll close out your hit with our poll question. I'll ask you our poll question. I won't do the ad read with you here. I'll spare you that. But our poll question is about the Canucks penalty kill. Will it improve again next year? They were 17th overall in the league with 79.1%, up from dead last at 71.6% in the season prior. Will they improve next year?
Yeah, it's impossible to know because I just don't know who's going to be on the penalty kill. I don't even know who's going to be coaching the penalty kill. We talked about that earlier. So, on June the whatever it is, 5th, it seems a little premature to be making those sort of projections. Get back to me on July 6th when maybe I have a better sense of who's in the fold and who's not in the fold and those types of things. But as I said earlier, 17th, that was a marked improvement, but it also leaves a ton of room for improvement. When you look at Carolina led the NHL, I think 86.4%. The LA Kings were 1.5% behind that. Like, there are teams that are doing this at a really high level. The Kings are interesting though, because as good as they were in the regular season, they got absolutely caved by that Edmonton Oilers power play. One of the reasons that they bowed out as quickly as they did in the playoffs. So penalty killing served them well in the regular season, but playoffs are all about matchups. And even the Canucks, like, they held their own for the most part against the Oilers, but the Oilers are going to get theirs, and you saw that. So I'm sure the Kings felt that they would have been able to do a better job against the Oilers in that opening round, but it didn't happen, and they've been on the sideline for a while now, and the Oilers are moving on to the Stanley Cup final. So yes, I want to believe that it's an area that can still improve and become a strength for the Vancouver Canucks, but I need to see the personnel that's going to be deployed in that particular area of the game.
Jeff, good stuff as always. We really appreciate it. And people can still find you, still doing rink wide in the offseason. Tell people about that.
Yeah, we've scaled it back because it's a post-game pod, and you may have heard they're not playing a lot of games these days. But we don't want to go quiet entirely, and there's news like this. So I'm going to round up the crew here. We're going to record an episode on Thursday, tomorrow. I think it'll be posted either late Thursday or early Friday. So yeah, I mean, we're, weekly, and as news warrants, we'll get Irf and we'll get the group together and push out some content there. And of course, continuing to write on the regular at Canucks Army. So yes, the games have disappeared, but we're into that 3-week phase now here between now and July 1st, where I think this is going to become more regular, where we've got some legitimate news to chew on, like the coaching moves that they made earlier today.
Gonna be more to come. Maybe we should do a post game of, I don't know, we'll go golfing together and then we can talk about how it went. I'm not a good golfer. You're a good golfer, right? I've never golfed with you, but I've heard stories.
I have my moments.
Oh, come on. You're too humble, Jeff. You're too humble. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
All right, boys. Thanks.
There he is, Jeff Paterson, who I've heard is an extremely good golfer. I think he's just really humble. But yeah, I'm not. Do you golf?
I believe
Oh, no,
it.
you don't golf, right?
Well, I mean, I'm okay pitch and putt, but give me a driver and I'm shanking it. So
okay,
that's a
fair
problem.
enough. Fair enough. Okay. Maybe the three of us will go golfing, and Jeff's post-game pod will just be him being like, yeah, I finished up the course about 20 minutes ago. I'm just waiting for Klotz and Armin to finish.
So I remember once Faber and I went golfing in, I think it was Penticton. This is not this past season, but the year before. And now he's actually like a decent golfer. He knows how to drive. But some of these were like 400 plus yard holes where I'm like, I can't even see the flag. So after about 3 or 4 holes of us starting from like the actual starting point, we decided, screw this. There's no way we have the skill level to match this. So we would take the cart like halfway down the green and start from there and kind of turn it into its own mini pitch and putt. So yeah, I definitely got a lot of room to improve on my golf game.
Okay, so a couple things. I've golfed a lot with Faber in the past 3 weeks. I think we've gone 2 or 3 times, and I've just been feeding this dude his lunch. I mean, not me personally, but we're playing Scramble, and my Scramble partner's really good, and Faber's the good partner, and I'm the bad partner, and we're entering a tournament together this summer as well, which is going to be fun, like a charity tournament where it's also Scramble. You know what Scramble is, Harm?
It's like you have a partner, right? And you take
so you have a partner. Yeah, and you both shoot, and then you just shoot from whoever had the best shot. So all your putts, same thing. You shoot from whoever had the best shot. When I have no pressure of okay, if I miss, I know my partner's going to do okay. I'm going for it every time. I'm going for these big putts. I'm not trying to play anything safe. I was sinking like 20-foot putts like nothing. It was crazy. And anyways, I got to play a full course all by myself soon. Haven't really done that this year, but I've been good lately. And scramble's my game. That's the best way for me to play golf, because I do take some shots.
I think I'm hitting the age now where all my friends want to learn how to play golf.
Oh yeah.
That's how I know.
It's coming,
like,
brother.
We're maturing now. We're actually becoming distinguished gentlemen, not just fresh out of high school. You know.
Matt Folger in the YouTube live chat. More disc golf talk, please. Have you ever played disc golf?
I haven't.
You'd like disc golf. You've thrown a frisbee before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, disc golf. You'd like disc golf. It's fun. Disc golf is really fun. Yeah, Casey DeSmith, big disc golf guy. Yeah. Okay, let's get to our poll question, which is brought to you by Bet365. You heard me ask it to Jeff Paterson. Keeping it simple today. Our poll question is, will the Canucks penalty kill improve again next year? They finished 17th overall with 79.1%, up from dead last at 71.6% in the 2022-23 season. Our options: yes, they will finish higher. No, it will finish lower. And then ask me after July 1st. Right now, people confident, 52.9% of people saying yes, it will finish higher. 6.9% nice say it will finish lower. 40.2% say ask me after July 1st. I think I'm somewhere in the middle there. I think given how much of a focus they put on the penalty kill last offseason and how much of a talking point it was, I feel like they're not just going to look at it this offseason and say, well, we just got to try and do that again. I think they're going to have that added emphasis once again on let's go make our penalty kill great. And the fact of the matter, Harm, it's easier to address your penalty kill than it is your power play on July 1st, right? Like, their power play wasn't great, but they're not going to really be able to address that on July 1st. The guy you go get to play with Elias Patterson, which we assume they're going to do at some point this offseason, that guy might play on your first power play unit, but when it comes to penalty killing, it's a lot easier to round out a good penalty kill with solid acquisitions in the offseason.
For sure. I'm surprised by the confidence that more than half the people think, yes, it will finish higher, considering J-Pat brought up that their 6 most used penalty killers are all on expiring contracts. And of course, that doesn't mean all of them are leaving, but because of that, I mean, I can't sit here today and say with confidence, yes, it's going to finish higher, because what am I basing that off of? What's the reasoning or logic behind that when I don't even know who's going to be killing penalties? So for me, I'm sort of leaning towards what J-Pat said earlier, where it's like, let's see after July 1st. But by the same token, I mean, we're talking about a PK that was roughly league average in the regular season. That shouldn't be too hard to replicate. Improving beyond that, we'll see. That's what is more up in the air.
That's the ask me after July 1st option. So, hey, you're allowed to pick that one. That was our poll question, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. Okay, let's get to anyone else. Do you want to do it, Harm?
I don't have it in front of me.
That's okay. I'll do it. Vancouver Canadians are on the road, but they'll be back for a big homestand starting next Tuesday, June 11th, and it's the dog days of summer. Bring your pup to the park and let them soak in the atmosphere at Nat Bailey. Don't miss the nooner at the Nat on Friday the 14th, which includes a rain-out doubleheader against Spokane. And don't miss Family Fun Sunday on Father's Day, June 16th. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday nooners, and superstar appearances all spring and summer long. To get your tickets, call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Okay, let's see. I saw some stuff in the chat. There was one hockey question, so at least we'll start there. We have an update on this, the guy that was driving with the suspended license. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah.
There's an update on that. Sorry, it's taken like 3 twists. I'm gonna find some information on that. I'm literally gonna prep that because I saw it 2 minutes before we went to air. There was an update on the story, so I'm gonna go find the update. Grady helped me out too, so Grady can kind of fact check what I'm saying. But let's see. There was one here that was actually a hockey question, and I wanted to actually ask it to you because it would be a good one for you to answer. It was about the Joshua Garland line. There it is. From Reg M. Harmon, any chance we run with Joshua Miller, Garland, and pair Besser with PD? We just need to find one top 6 forward. And of course, this is Reg calling the Canucks we, not me, someone who covers the team, using we to describe the team. Anyways, continue. Answer the question.
Hey, you're also not a national reporter.
No.
I think ideally, if you do bring Joshua and Garland back, they start on a third line when you're healthy, just because if you're not deep enough offensively, if those guys are in your top 6, like day one of training camp when everybody's healthy, I don't think so. Plus, I think Miller and Besser meshed so well as a partnership that you go back to them, right? Besser scored 40 goals. I think the way that they create off the cycle together, Miller is one of the best playmakers below the dots in the NHL. Brock Besser is one of the best players in the NHL at getting open in the slot when his line mates are controlling possession down low. So it's a kind of a match made in heaven. You want to continue that dominance at the top of the lineup. So I would still want Miller and Besser together as a duo, and then have Garland and Joshua if he resigns further down the lineup.
Okay, this one was about Ratu. This was from Alec Correa. When does Ratu get a chance? Does Baines get a fourth line shot? Who should get a shot internally for depth prices? I've been thinking about this quite a bit, Harm. It really doesn't feel like the Canucks have those internal options like readily available to them to just elevate right now. Like Jonathan Lekarmaki is going to get every chance to crack the Canucks out of training camp. I feel like we got to start having that conversation. He's going to get the opportunity. Like, it's not like he's going to be skating in Group C, I don't think. I think he'll get a shot with the main group, maybe play a preseason game or two. They're going to give him a shot because it would be a really good thing for this team if Lekarmaki can make the team out of camp. I don't think it's likely, but I think they're going to give him every opportunity.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he makes that out of camp, but who knows? Maybe he has a huge summer with Ratu. He could be a dark horse if he has a big summer. I thought he had a pretty decent year in Abbotsford, much better on the wing than at center, so that matters in terms of projection. But we know that the Canucks aren't that deep on the wings anymore. So could Ratu be maybe not a guy that breaks the team out of camp, but somebody who gets a cup of coffee at some point later in the season? I could see it. Baines is somebody that I'm looking for just because he's a little bit older. He also got his cup of coffee last year. Plus, you have to remember, this is a guy who's been a late bloomer who year after year has shown that steady improvement. His points per game went from like 0.56 in his first AHL season to nearly 1 full point per game. And I think we could tell that, okay, he's not really NHL ready yet, but if he takes another step, I don't think he's far off from being a player that can play meaningful NHL games for you next season, especially because he is such a smart player. And I think he's a quick study with how quickly he acclimated to the professional environment, the steady progress that he's shown. Besides that, I mean, you're looking at Podkolzin, like you're hoping that he can take another step. Put it this way, heading into, I also want to give a shout out to Max Hassan. He'd be another player that I'm looking at. 23 years old. The combination that he has of speed and tenacity, work rate, being a natural centerman, he could be a legit depth option. He's a guy that when I look at all the players that got an opportunity from Abbotsford last year, out of the guys that did not get an NHL chance, Hassan was probably next up in terms of he deserved a look, because it wasn't just the point totals that he put up in a top 6 role. Most importantly, he just plays a style of game with how many battles he wins, how fast he is, where I'm like, okay, that could actually translate as a depth NHL centerman. So he's somebody that I look at. But in having said that, all these guys that I've mentioned, whether it's Ratu, Baines, Podkolzin, Sasson, with the exception of Lekarmaki, I don't see a high ceiling for those players, where we're kind of looking at the names that I mentioned mostly to just be filling out depth roles rather than like, put it this way, not next season, but the year after, I can circle that and go, man, there's a legit shot that Lekarmaki could not just play NHL games, but be a legit difference maker in your top 9, or that Willander in 2 years could be a legit piece for you on the back and not just playing depth games. But I don't see any legit like top 9 forwards or like being one of your top 4 or 5 defensemen, any new names emerging next season outside of what they do in trades and free agency.
Just on Max Sasson, organization really likes Max Sass. I call him Max Sasson all the time. Sasson, it's Sasson, right?
I think so. I'm not 100%
I like
sure.
Sasson. I like Sasson. You could be called Max the Assassin. Big game Max. That's what Jack Rathbone called him because he scored some timely playoff goals. Organization really, really likes this player, and it'll be interesting to see where he might slot in on that depth chart. And hey, you've got Manny Malhotra down there now, so go teach him. Someone else brought this up. I wonder if Malhotra can help Ratu be a better center. Ratu's decent on draws. Help him figure out the rest of that position. Manny Malhotra.
It's the foot speed for Ratu. Right, it's like that's the biggest concern that I've had with how he's looked in the AHL. But the faceoffs, like Nils Aman needs one-on-one coaching lessons from Manny Malhotra. Like he's a perfect example, right? Aman's a 40% guy in the NHL for draws. If he became, it's not going to happen overnight or in one season necessarily, but if he could become like an above 50% faceoff guy, he could be a sort of defensive specialist for you in a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Rather than just being a guy who like won't hurt you. He could be a legit like cheaper Teddy Bluger.
Neutralize the opposition.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. This one from Sinochick. Which Canuck player who shot higher than average shooting percentage wise will regress next season? Nils Höglander feels like the easy pick there. I was doing an article yesterday where I looked back at all of our predictions that we made prior to the season starting. We had 7 predictions. I think 4 of them were right. Obviously, there was the Besser 30 goals, which I never stopped talking about. Healthy Thatcher Demko breaking into the Vezina conversation. Noah Juleson playing a career high in games. And then Nils Höglander being a mainstay. He was there. He was there all year. Scored 24 even strength goals. That shooting percentage is going to come down next season.
Yeah. Look, even if that does happen, I'm not as focused on the goal totals with Höglander as I am, can he become a trustworthy full-time top 9 player under Rick Tocchet? Because spent a large chunk of the first half of the season on the 4th line, only averaged 12 minutes per game in the regular season, just north of that. Was in and out of the lineup a little bit, scratched for a couple games in the playoffs, averaged only 10 minutes there. For me, it's the two-way trust. Can he continue to level that up? Because last season, he already took substantial steps in that department. I remember under Bruce Boudreau, turnovers used to be a massive problem with Höglander. There were a lot of defensive breakdowns, a lot of very obvious plays where you're like, man, I can't trust Höglander. I think he cut down on a lot of those mistakes, and there were points in the regular season where Tocchet would sprinkle in, okay, Höglander's earned being out there late in the 3rd period, for example, but can he continue to level up in that sense? Can he be a more consistent play driver? Those are the areas where if he improves there, he can still be really impactful, even if he doesn't score 24, 25 goals yet.
You know who this conversation sounds identical to? The conversations we were having about a certain player last offseason, coming off a sky-high shooting percentage, saying, well, he's going to regress there. Oh, I just did the predictions article. I just went, maybe not you, maybe you were smarter than I was, but when I was talking about Kuzmenko, it's in the predictions article. My prediction was, well, Kuzmenko's going to regress, but he might be able to play a better all-around game, and he'll learn to play for Rick Tocchet and be a trusted guy that you can go to. That's what I wrote about him.
It's not the same. It's not the same because Kuzmenko, I never had the confidence that he was going to actually be impactful away from the puck. Kuzmenko's slow. When has he ever been like stripped a player of the puck? And you're like, wow. There was one back check last season where I can actually think of an example. Whereas Höglander, he has the speed, the tenacity, the battle-winning chops to actually contribute to a line's success beyond just offense.
Look,
that's not the same thing.
At the end of the day, we're talking about a player with a really high shooting percentage that's probably going to regress.
That's the only similarity.
No, we're talking about that player becoming well-rounded enough.
Plus, Kuzmenko was already in like a top line role with Patterson.
That's true.
Whereas Höglander, again, in the regular season, he averaged like 12.5 minutes per game. It's not the same thing at all.
It's not the same. There's some similarities. Come on now.
Sure, I guess in the sense that his shooting percentage and goal totals might regress. That's about it.
Yeah, okay. I'll drop it. Okay, Adam Voth. Does McWard get a good look as a bottom pair right D? It's about time we have Dave Hall on the show. I think we'll have Dave on next week. This is more of a question for Dave, but by all indications, like Cole McWard didn't have a really great season out in Abbotsford. Certainly not one that you would go into free agency and say, you know what? Well, we don't need to go get a bottom pairing guy or a depth guy because Cole McWard's ready to go. And further to that, like you already have Noah Juleson locked up. Cole McWard's not going to outplay Noah Juleson. It looks like they're going to sign Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers ideally is playing on your third pair. Cole McWard's not playing anywhere above Myers or Juleson. And if Myers is your third pair guy and Juleson is your your seventh defenseman, McWard's not really getting a look. You might see a scenario if there's a bunch of injuries in front of those guys, but I don't think McWard's getting a serious look on the NHL roster next year.
Well, the injuries part is important though, because remember not last season, but the year before, where half the Canucks blue line got hurt, and we had an extended stretch where Wolanin, Juleson, and Brisebois well, Hirose was a little bit different because that's a college free agent signing. Your season's done at that point. That's just to incentivize a guy to sign there. Sure. It's not the same thing. But when Tocchet first took over, because of injuries to guys like OEL, I think maybe Ethan Bear, but at the time, 3 of those Abbotsford guys were in the lineup at the same time.
They'd like to avoid that, wouldn't they? They'd like to avoid that. Yeah,
but it might happen. And that's where, okay, McWard could be organizational depth for you.
Hirose had a tough year. 2 assists in 33 games with Abbotsford. He also had that really weird injury that was just kind of like cone of silence. That's the thing. It's hard to get injury updates out of Abbotsford because nobody goes down there. And then when they do, they're not really asking. So like I went down to Abbotsford and I remember just asking Jeremy College, I'm like, I want injury updates on this player. And that's when we eventually got injury updates, but those players have been out for like a month. I was just like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to go ask. And to his credit, like he told me what was going on and I was able to report it, but it was just really funny because nobody really knew what was going on. And then when I asked Colleton, he's like, yeah, this is what's going on. So shout out Jeremy Colleton, man. All the time in the world for Jeremy Colleton. But we'll see. We'll have Dave Hall on. I think next week is a good time to have him on. And
Hirose, we have to stop talking about Hirose as a prospect, though. The guy's a man.
Will he be at development camp, Harm? Do you think he'll be at development camp?
Dude, I will lose my mind if I see him at Penticton.
Oh, the Young Stars Classic. Yeah. The other teams are just like, okay, we have to start coming up with a definition of what a young star is and how you qualify for the Young Stars. And the running joke here is that Hirose, and I mean, he signed as a college free agent, so we're not making fun of Hirose or anything. It was just that at Dev Camp last year, you had like 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds there, and then you had 24-year-old Akito Hirose like playing in these scrimmages with them, and all the power to him. It was just a really funny thing to happen. I don't think he'll be at Dev Camp or Young Stars this year.
He's only a little bit younger than Hronek.
Yes.
Like the difference between them is only like a year or 2.
That really puts it into perspective. Would Quinn Hughes? No. How old is Quinn Hughes right now? Isn't he younger? No, they're same age. They're the same age.
Yeah.
But Quinn's technically younger because he's born in October. So yeah, Quinn Hughes is younger than Akito Hirose. So I wouldn't, no more calling Akito Hirose a prospect. Not on this show, at least. Okay, let's get to away from the hockey stuff as we close out here. Grady, pull this up. The little wrinkle. So if you don't remember, folks, we talked about this guy here, Corey Harris, who went viral for not having a driver's license while appearing in Zoom court for something related to not having a driver's license. Like he was in court about not having a driver's license and a suspended license. And then he was on Zoom and you could see that he was driving. So he went viral for that because the judge was like, what are you doing type thing. We talked about it last week. You've probably seen it by now. But anyways, there's another twist in it. There was first last week, again, the first twist. There's two twists. I have to remember this. There's two twists. The first one being that he actually didn't have a suspended license, and he did have a license, and it was a clerical error that he was the victim of. Then he went back to court today. This is literally like 5 minutes before we went live. He's never had a Michigan license or license in any state, is what the judge ended up saying. This is the quote. There was no error by anybody. It was a failure on the part of Mr. Harris to do certain things. I grant you that it can be a complicated process, but it certainly wasn't anybody's fault. It's a wild story to just kind of follow along on because it totally went viral. We were laughing about it last week. And now there's all these twists. I almost don't want to follow it anymore. I just want to find out what the resolution is and what the actual like truth is. Because someone's got something wrong here. The facts just don't add up here. Something's wrong about this story.
I can't believe so he's never had a driver's license, period.
Never.
That is wild.
Yeah. And
that is wild.
But that's what I'm saying is like the judge says that, which is great. Maybe like that's why he was in trouble for driving, because he doesn't have a license. But originally he was in court for a suspended license. So how could he have a suspended license if he doesn't have a license? I don't know. If you're a lawyer,
maybe get a fake license, like a fake ID.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Jeez. Yeah. Anyways, I just want to find out what the resolution of this story is. Something interesting to follow. But we'll close it out there. We'll get to our Bet365 bet of the day and wrap it up. Harm, do you want me to do another baseball bet? Because I think I will. I crushed it. I crushed it last time when I picked the Baltimore Orioles to win. Remember that? That was my last bet. I said Orioles money line. Sure enough, Orioles take it to the Jays. And we're sticking with it. Actually, no, we're not. You know what we're going with? I'm gonna go a little off the board. Harmon, do you know who Paul Skeens is?
No.
You don't? Do you know who Livy Dunn is?
Yes.
Okay, so Paul Skeens is Livy Dunn's boyfriend. Okay, he was the number 1 overall pick in last year's MLB draft. And for baseball prospects, usually it's like 2-3 years. 3 to like 7 years it can be until they actually make their not pro debut, but MLB debut. So Paul Skeens started the year in AAA, came up to Major League Baseball with the Pirates, and he's just been absolutely phenomenal. Tonight, he's on the big stage. He's in LA. Livy Dunn's probably going to be there too. You never know. Watch the broadcast. It's like she's like their Taylor Swift. They always cut to her. They interviewed her on Paul's debut, which I liked. Like I like Paul Skeens a lot. I'm a huge Paul Skeens fan. If this bet hits, I'll buy a Paul Skeens jersey. That's what I'll do. I'll buy myself a Paul Skeens jersey.
What's the bet?
Okay. The bet is Paul Skeens to record 9 punch-outs against the Los Angeles Dodgers at plus 210 odds. You can go get Paul Skeens to record 9 strikeouts against the LA Dodgers tonight. Must be 90 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Big Maple, James Paxton is the starter for the Dodgers in that game.
So can you explain this to me? It's been a while since I actually followed baseball. I know 9 strikeouts is a lot for a starter to throw, but is that even more difficult now when it seems like anecdotally starters are like don't go that deep? I remember when it was super normal for starters to go like 7 innings, 8 innings when they're pitching well. Is that like how much has that been phased out, and how much more of a long shot is it for a starter to get 9 strikeouts?
It's such an interesting question, Harm, because so there's a couple things here, and I'll try not to bore you and go on too long, but like this is an awful year for hitters. Everybody's average is down. More guys are striking out more than ever, and that's just been a trend in baseball in the past few years of just guys are swinging for the fences every time. Home runs matter more than average to most teams, to most players. So what you end up getting is a lot of swing and miss. So the strikeout rates are up in baseball right now. Like there are more strikeouts than there has been before. But for Paul Skeens, he isn't going deep in games because they're saving his arm. So like Paul Skeens won't pitch more than 6 innings, even if his pitch count's low. And it's not so much about innings, it's more so about pitch count. But naturally, if you log 6 innings, you're probably going to end up throwing like 80 pitches, seems to be where they're kind of capping him. Because as you know, there's a lot of injuries happening right now in baseball with pitchers. So they're being very careful with his young arm, but he's logged 6 innings in his past 3 starts. His strikeout numbers in his past 3 starts, he had 9 against Detroit, 3 against San Francisco, and 11 against the Chicago Cubs. And then the game before that was his MLB debut, where he got 7 punch-outs. I just think bright lights, Dodger Stadium. He talked about how when he was 15 years old, he watched Shohei Ohtani's MLB debut, and he was so enamored with Ohtani. Now he faces him tonight. It's going to be a great game. I'm excited to watch it, and I'm calling it now. 9 punchies for Paul Skeens.
Let's go. I'm excited. I will
All right,
not
yeah,
be
me
watching
other-
the game, but I am excited to see the results after the fact.
It's Jacoby. Harm asking a baseball question made Quad so happy. It did. If you ever have a baseball question, you just let me know. I'll be ready. I'll be ready.
I got you.
All right. I like this from Nick P talking about the suspended license. Quads can relate to this since he still has to wait a year to get his L. I said it before. Full license. First, my friends. Early birthday. I had the N first. I had the full license first. Passed all my tests on the first try. So, just throwing that out there. Got
Impressive.
That's right. Impressive. I'm a good driver too. You've driven with me.
Yeah,
I'm a good driver.
No, you're good.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, we'll close it out there. For my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer Grady Sass, my name is Dave Gujelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.